Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me here today. If you want to follow along, we'll be in the 30th chapter of Genesis in verse number 22. Chapter 30, verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb. She conceived and bore a son, and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, saying, May the Lord add to me another son. Here we see God doing what God can do. He answers the prayer of Rachel. He remembers her, and she now delivers her first child. This first child is again purely on the gift, the grace of God. That God has stepped in. And again, it makes it very clear that God was involved, that God made this possible, that it wasn't anything else, no other outside, no medicine they were taking or no anything else. God intervened in the life of Jacob and Rachel, and allowed Rachel to have a child. She had been praying, she had been trusting God, and now God answered her prayer. And she declares here that when this child is born, she says, "May God even add another." And we know, I'm get ahead of myself a little bit here, but later on that he would, much later, that Rachel would have another son, and that his name would be Benjamin. And so God adds to her, and when she has this child, again, another thing that changes here is she says, then God, capital G, little o d, she conceived and bore a son, and said, God, G, capital G, little o d. And then now notice in verse 24, she says, may the Lord, all capitals. So she uses a different Hebrew name for God in this place. She's calling him God, but she has been calling him Elohim, but now she calls him Lord, which is Jehovah. Jehovah being the God of salvation, the God of redemption. And so she is putting God in his rightful place and putting herself in her place. That God has done this, that God has intervened, and that he has stepped in. We have seen Rachel be somewhat spiritually immature up to this point, but now through all of her experience, through the things that her and Jacob have been through, she has learned to put her confidence in God. She has learned to trust him in her situations, and is now trusting him not only in the present, but she is trusting him for the future when she says, may the Lord add to me another son. And so we see a great deal of growth spiritually in Rachel in this passage. Again, we see the hand of God, the power of God, all those things. But here she says, one of the main things I want us to draw attention to here is that when she has this child, we see, again, if we go back, think about where we've been in these last few days in discussing Rachel, that now we see that Rachel, just this move from calling him Elohim, God, to Lord or Jehovah, which again, that word, the name there that she uses is a name that means my salvation, my redemption. So she has moved dramatically in her relationship with God from where she was to where she is. And my challenge for all of us today would be to take a moment and look at the calendar or whatever you need to do to think back and think, am I growing spiritually? Am I maturing spiritually? Am I closer to God than I was? Is my prayer life stronger than it used to be? Is my understanding of God's Word more than it used to be? Is my love for God's people greater than it used to be? Is my love for God's church greater than it used to be? We see growth in Rachel question is, can we see any growth in ourselves? You think about it. Have a great day. We'll see you here tomorrow morning.